Okay. What's going on, guys? It's Nate, and this is my first time making kind of like a tutorial video, so bear with me. But today I thought the best place to start off would just be kind of showing my process for doing a quick kind of sketch from start to finish. So I've got my iPad here, and I use Procreate. I use Procreate for probably 90% of what I do. At some point in the project, I draw a lot on paper and then scan it. This whole folder is full of ink drawings from my sketchbook that have been scanned and edited, which I want to show in another video from start to finish, including filming myself drawing on paper and then editing it. But right now I've just got my screen share from my iPad, so I'm gonna do a tutorial that's entirely in Procreate. So the first thing we're gonna do is make a new image. So I'm just gonna make a nice 3240 by 4320. This is kind of just like a bigger version of a screen size canvas. I just use a regular iPad. Let's see, this can get 15 layers, which is going to be plenty for what we're doing. I don't have an iPad Pro, so I have to bear in mind my layers a lot, especially when I'm doing high-res commissions. I do a lot of album art, and a lot of those have to be 5,000 by 5,000. So when you work with something that big, you can only have like 6 layers. But okay, enough talk. So let's get in here. So what I like to do is do a preliminary layer anytime I'm sketching and I want it to really kind of take form and get cleaned up. Anytime I'm doing it digitally, I like to start with just a really bright kind of cyan, and I find it to be a really easy color to later draw on top of. But I'm gonna kind of use this automatic drawing approach that I saw on YouTube that apparently the illustrator Morbius was known for implementing. And I'm just gonna kind of start drawing shapes and lines, and already I feel like we've kind of got something coming in here. Let's see what we got. This happens all the time. Start working something, kind of gotta resize it. It starts to not fit. These are giving me horse leg vibes, so we're gonna go for kind of like a satyr. So maybe kind of like a lute in here. And let's see. Frequently when you're drawing in Procreate, I find, maybe I'm going too fast. I find I don't know the names of the tools, but this little squiggly tool right here, this is what lets you kind of like manipulate the image. And I am constantly using this, constantly kind of tweaking, redirecting, changing, resizing. You can select stuff with freehand like that, or by drawing rectangles or circles. I almost always just use freehand, and it's like, oh, I want to change this tail. I just draw around it. Then when I select the kind of mover tool, boom, that's all that's selected. And then you can, resize it, freeform, uniform, and distort. Kind of keeps things equilateral. That's amazing for perspective. You're like drawing a couch in a living room, and the couch is just kind of wrong. You can just distort it and make it line up with your perspective lines really crisp. And warp, I use a lot. Warp kind of lets you change the fluidity, and especially at a stage like this where I don't really care about retaining my line quality, I can warp stuff really easily to change the shape in kind of this like liquid way. So I'm not digging this arm. We're gonna get rid of this arm. And I guess I blasted past this too, but I used syrup kind of by default. It's a nice kind of clean ink brush that has a fairly high self-correction setting on it by default, and I have very kind of shaky arms, which is why I was not a good tattoo artist. um, but I find the self-correction to help a lot. And it just kind of gives an interesting cleanliness to my line work that I feel like I don't always have. And my approach to working digital, every once in a while I'll encounter someone who kind of poo-poos working digitally, usually kind of more like art school types. Like, I went to school for painting, so I was kind of in the same boat too. I was like, oh man, but you're not making anything, which is just kind of, I don't know. Now I think that's kind of stupid. But I would say is, if you are going to work digitally, ask yourself kind of, why and what do you want to get out of it. And one of the things that I can get from working digitally that I can't really get working physically is this kind of tightness to the lines. I don't normally get that. So I like to use brushes that are going to help me achieve that. So we're getting kind of a satyr face in here, little goat man. And what should he be holding? What should he be holding? It's kind of the question, right? I'm instantly like, oh, a weapon or something. But I kind of want to switch it up. I kind of want to have him perhaps just gesturing with glee. Maybe with some magic kind of coming off. Okay. So I already lied. I think we're going to change the canvas and do kind of like a square, because this is a fairly square drawing. And again, this is exactly what I was talking about, working digitally. Hey, you want the canvas to be resized? Guess what? You can do that. When you're painting, you can't do that at all. You have to change. You have to do so much meticulous planning to make sure your concept sketches are to scale and all of this stuff. And working digitally, you can just be like, hey, I'll just hack off a couple inches. Okay, so we're also gonna put some flowers down here. This guy's gonna be like kind of like a satyr in the Feywild, if anyone's into D&D. So yeah, and maybe he'll have like a little pouch with like some wine or something, a little flask, a little flagon. I don't quite know how I want to. Yeah, I like that. Erasing is your friend. Yeah, like I said, right now this is just to kind of get out kind of a basic rough shape. And hey, some parts came out really clean and some parts are still kind of ambiguous, and that's cool. I think a good sketch should kind of have this illusion of completeness, but really there's just a few parts that make sense. But then you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, this, I totally see it. But it's like, how am I gonna draw that exactly? Okay. So here's kind of a nice little basic sketch. When I work with a client and I send them concept sketches, this is what I'll send. I might go in with a watercolor brush and add some shading, which I guess I can show really quick. Just kind of get a dark color, and then I like using the gouache brush. I find that it has more of a natural look than the watercolor brush. And you can always just change the opacity so it can also just function as watercolor when you need it to. So yeah, if I were sending this to a client, I would probably go in and add some shadows here to kind of help establish the form of the figure. to give them like a better idea of what it's going to look like when it's colored, because color is going to change so much about this, especially the value. And then let's see, then I'll definitely put in like a big wash at the back and really try to retain some of the whites on the goat itself. Make this a little darker. Okay. So yeah, this is rough, but you can just see the difference that makes, that's going to give a client a way better feel of what it's going to look like. And I feel like half of doing commissions is just being able to convey to the client kind of like expectations, because sketching is hard because sketches make sense to you because you drew it, but sometimes someone sits down and looks at a sketch and they might not even really understand what they're looking at. They might not even really understand that they're looking at something that's supposed to be rough, which I try to always be upfront about that. Like, hey, I'm going to send you some rough sketches. But I think the gouache also kind of helps to add a polish almost. Like, hey, this isn't just a sketch. This is like a well-developed sketch. So then they're going to understand that the final product isn't just going to be like, it's going to be well-developed as well. So, okay, so like I said, I drew the cyan, and we're going to, ink over it with black. Sometimes I drop the opacity on this once it's done to like 50%. And it just kind of, now it's kind of like using a light table. So yeah, I like to start with the head. There's lots of arguments about that, like where to start with the drawing. I like to start with the part that I know I'm going to not like doing, or that's going to be annoying. So we're going to start with the head. And line work's the hardest part. And when I really first started trying to translate my art school education into what I wanted from my own personal illustration practice, I think figuring out a good flow with line work was the first big step. I didn't study illustration. I have a feeling that if I did, I probably would have had some of that stuff explained to me, but the drawing classes I took were academic charcoal drawing classes. Just gonna shave this off. It's one downside to Procreate. Has this tool where you can draw like an imperfect circle, and then if you hold, it will kind of correct it into being a perfect circle, I guess, or like more perfect. But sometimes the lines don't totally translate. But yeah, my drawing classes were very academic, and a lot of it was about, yes, getting your line work done first, but so much of it was about shading that the line work was almost considered more structural than anything. Kind of like scaffolding, I guess, might be a good fancy art term to use. But with my style now, it is so line work dependent. It is so line work heavy. And sometime I'll show, or when we're done with this, I'll even show how ultimately simple my coloring often is. And the line work kind of creates this illusion that a lot more has been done. But I wasn't really sure of how to figure that out. And there was a stretch of time where I was doing tattoos, and I don't tell anybody. I was not licensed. But there was a stretch of time where I was doing tattoos, and tattoo artists follow a very strict, especially in traditional American style tattoos, they follow a very strict order of operations. And what they do is they always start off with the line work. And the line work is, if you ask most tattoo artists, they'll tell you, is the most stressful part. And it's because that's when you're really building the image. But I kind of found that to be a really useful way of constructing my own images. So that's something I kind of carried on with me from my very brief time spent studying how to do tattoos. I was probably doing tattoos for just about a year, or maybe less than that. I did about 50 tattoos, So I almost got to the point where I knew what I was doing and then stopped. But, hey, look at that. He's looking good. But yeah, so it's taken some time figuring out how to develop my own flow, and I think everyone probably struggles with that, and it's just a part of being an artist, and it's probably going to change, even once you really feel like you've started to figure it out, because you're never going to be totally happy, and your style should be changing. But what I have found works best for me is really focusing on the line work, and this is definitely the way I have figured out how to do that with that, while still kind of keeping it fun and fresh and spontaneous in its generation, because I don't like going in with too much of a plan. As you can see here, I've got this. I might let that clip. Yeah, that's that feature I was talking about. If you press and hold, it will snap. How do I want to do this? There we go. But hey, as you can see, some of this stuff was developed, but a lot of it kind of just making up. Even the underdrawing doesn't really give me that much guidance. But I think the key to a good sketch is also it gives you just enough for your imagination to start playing off of it. Yeah, I feel like I should focus and finish this rant about my process. So yeah, after I got out of school, one of the first things I kind of started doing was illustration. I was really drawn to it, and I didn't really have the space or the money to paint, which kind of naturally led me into getting into some of the different commercial applications of illustration, one of which was tattooing. And that's kind of where I first started coming up with my own voice outside of the school setting for illustration. But like I said, I did not study illustration, so I have a feeling I probably would have gotten some wonderful tips if I had. But I was just too dang interested in paint, man. I was too dang interested in playing with the color and everything. But yeah. So that's a little bit of how I ended up forming my style, or my method, my kind of procedural approach up to this point, which I hope that was coherent and not too much of a rant. But yeah, so we're gonna get this kind of wine skin going. There's another thing I'll say. It takes a really long time and a lot of practice, which I think something used to discourage me And now I'm a little bit on the other side of it, but of course, you're always practicing, you're always learning. I always wanted to draw everything from imagination. And then you get to art school, and they kind of pull out the spray bottle like you would like your cat. If your cat is getting into something they shouldn't, and you just spray them. And I feel like that was every art professor when it came to drawing from your mind. They were always like, you have to have a natural reference. You have to have something you're observing, and you gotta pull from that. And I actually think they're spot on. The part they didn't mention is like that's important because you train your brain to just start noticing how stuff works, like what shape things are. You just start paying so much more attention to what does a horse hoof look like? What does a dog look like when it's walking? But then you do that for a few years, and then you really build up quite the library of memories. At least I do. And I think part of that might come down to being more of a visual person, but I take notice to that kind of stuff. And now I feel very comfortable drawing fairly detailed things from my imagination. Now, does this look like a goat really looks? He has these weird hands. There's plenty of things that are embellished. There's plenty of things that are different. But if you can just get the quality of what you're looking for, and it's just kind of, it's hard because it's just kind of a yes or a no. But I think I'm getting there with this one. But that is to say, I do think there's a massive truth to it that you've got to put in the hours drawing still lifes. You've got to put in the hours, even drawing little blocks and all sorts of stupid things, mannequin heads, to really train your brain to start processing life differently almost. I mean, this is where my interest in psychology, I think, really started to blossom, because in art school, I felt like I was training my perception. And I thought, wow, what a crazy thing to be able to do, to actually change the way you perceive things. And that, sent me down a whole other rabbit hole. But we're not talking about that today. As fun it is to talk about sensory and perception and all that psychology stuff, maybe for another time. These kind of look like little petunias or something. I don't know. Like with plants, for example, if you're drawing a flower, ask yourself, what makes a flower beautiful? What makes it interesting? And you kind of have this cliche in your head of what a flower looks like. I don't know. I find it's about kind of finding this balance between the cliche in your mind and then what it really looks like, and just constantly having those two things kind of go back and forth. Okay, forgot the magic. And where are we at? We're at about 25. Okay, I wanted this to be about 30 minutes long, so this is great. Doing pretty good on time. Yeah, some magic. Is it magic if there is not beams coming off of it? That's another thing. It's all about building that sort of visual vocabulary. And, hey, look at that. It's all about building that visual vocabulary. And a lot of that comes with looking at how other people draw stuff. Watch cartoons. What does magic look like in those cartoons? Stuff like that. Okay, so really quick, I am going to color this, but first I like to add a layer of hatching. So like this is what I consider the line work. I personally like to add a layer of hatching to kind of add some form. And maybe this is, the art school masochist in me, but I loved hatching. And honestly, not trying to, toot my own horn. One of the things I am not usually, I hate the way that sounded. One of the things I have been complimented on is my hatching, especially in my ink drawings. And it's important to find the things that you like and that can add to anything. A lot of my drawings benefit from hatching. Now I've been trying to step away from that. I've been trying to not have anything be automatic. Like for example, I think I'm just gonna hatch a couple of spots on this guy just to kind of add some little pockets of information and value in a few spots. I didn't realize that. We kind of need... There. That's nice. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to merge these layers. Usually, this is just kind of like habits. I usually will start a new layer, keep it separate, and then once it's done, merge. Now, if I had infinite layers, I wouldn't do that, but because I usually have to be conscientious of layers, I've found myself kind of doing that automatically. Okay, so time for color. So what I'm thinking for this guy is watercolor. I think he'll look really nice with some watercolor. No, let's do normal. Let's just do regular coloring. So I'm going to I'll save the watercolor for another tutorial. So I'm gonna try to get a nice fur color here. Kind of want this like pinkish brown. And hey, this is where the painting comes in. I can be pretty persnickety, pretty particular about my colors. Okay, how's this look? Oh, that's pretty good. Okay. So a lot of the coloring for me is just going to be tracing. Oh, and I guess I should probably talk about my process some. So using the layers here, I do my color layers under my ink. And I actually started doing this when I first got into digital illustration, because I would scan my ink drawings from my sketchbook and then I would want to color them. So I go through a process of essentially isolating the black and then just having this backgroundless layer that's just the ink. And then I would color under it. And I think it's kind of how they used to make old animation cells. But the end result is nice because you can be a little more sloppy with the color, and then everything just kind of stays nice and wrapped underneath that line work. And again, that's why just, really taking your time with the line work is so important. But like I said, I'm trying to keep this to about 30 minutes, which may surprise you because we're only just now starting to color. But especially with these sketches, like when I'm making something for myself and it's not a commission, I like to just kind of have some fun with the coloring until I'm kind of done and then move on. I think I think I like that. That's another part of the line, like working hard on the line work, is I want the line work to be able to speak, and the color, it's nice, but I never want it to detract. But I did something earlier that I feel like I should talk about, which was filling that leg. So it took me forever to figure out the best way to color is just tracing the contour and then filling the inside. This is another example of, hey, well, if you're working digitally, work digitally. What is the point of not working, to your advantage with everything you've got? And I know there are some faster ways to do that. This line work was pretty loose, so I didn't really feel like I could use like color selection that easily. But in another video, I will show. I want to do a video where I kind of break down all the different coloring techniques that I employ, which might involve using textured brushes or using kind of more of the software to color things automatically, which not just saves time, but sometimes when prepping something like a screen print, it really helps make sure your color blocks are nice and clean and are like exactly the shape they need to be. Okay. I'm gonna just erase this. Again, there are a million ways to do it. It's looking pretty good. Now, this is looking a little red for me. So often I will put down a layer of color and then I will go into the hue and saturation tool and start playing around with it. I think I want this a little more green. Yes, there we go. It almost looks kind of like a wolf, which kind of like, it's almost a little perverse. It's kind of like a half goat, half wolf. Okay. Now, of course, I keep my colors on separate layers. That's the main thing. I keep my line work all on one layer so I can have as many layers as possible for color. But let's go with a nice green tunic. I wonder, any of my Zelda heads out there, you know what's up. So maybe this guy is like the hero of time from some goat dimension where everyone is a goat. Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, everyone kind of has their own process, but I think doing things this way makes the coloring also, and hey, this may be the painter in me, kind of makes the coloring feel like a reward. You put in all the hard work to get that line work really nailed, and then you get to go in with the color and just kind of, it's almost like working in a coloring book you made for yourself. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's see. I kind of want like this kind of like cold navy color for the horns, kind of like a dark navy. Go. And color's hard. I love it. So it's something that I've spent a lot of time kind of trying to develop a good sense for palettes and stuff like this. Is too dark. This is what I'm talking about. The color selection, or this hue and saturation tool. More green. Okay. Then reselect it. Yeah, there are a lot of tools out there to generate color palettes. Like, let's say I, just knew I wanted to have the tunic and the fur. I could have taken these colors and gone to, I think, Adobe Color is a website, and you put them in there, and then it will kind of generate some palettes for you, which I used to do that in art school all the time. Now I'm trying to make kind of this like yellowy leather color. That's what this is going to be. I wonder if goats have kind of mixed feelings on using leather, or if they have some kind of weird tension with the cow people. Who's to say? Who's to say? Okay. I think I want this a little more. I don't know what I want. A little more red. Then you. I think I want you even less red. Yes. There we go. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Like I was saying, figuring out color, it's hard. You're going to be constantly fine-tuning stuff. Okay, now I want this kind of like gold for the loot. Which, hey, getting gold is hard. Talk about a color that really is not really a color. Because it's not. You know, when you look at something that's gold, what you're really getting kind of experientially is the light reflecting off of it and all these different things. You can't just like walk up to it with the ink dropper tool and be like, yep, that's gold. So unless if it's like metallic, it's not, you know, you get what I'm saying. So instead, we got this yellow. This is a little yellow for me, so I kind of want to desaturate it, maybe make it a little green. Give it, there we go. It's closer to like a gold. What else was it? Oh yeah, the stars are gold. And like this is gonna be gold. Oh, I also find trying to limit yourself with colors is good. Like, I'm going to color this guy's nose, and I'm going to take the color from this leather to get it. So that way, no, that I do not like that. No, never mind. I take back everything I said. I think I want more of like a blue. Yeah. What color is a goat's nose? I don't know. I wanted to do this whole thing without looking anything up. There we go. We'll go with that. I kind of hate it. Okay, maybe I had too strong of a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe pink is the way. But I needed more of like a corally pink. Higher saturation, maybe. You know, we're just gonna leave it be. And if every time I look at this drawing, all I do is stare at that nose, then that's life. C'est la vie. Okay. What I'm gonna do though is kind of spread this around, put it in his ears, and put it down here in the flowers. Lest we neglect the rest of the drawing. What am I doing on time? 38 minutes. Okay, I totally lied. This is not. I brutally lied to you. Okay. I do know what I want for this. I want kind of this like dark aqua green. And then I'm just gonna kind of like roughly approximate this shape. Yeah, you know, you'd be surprised. You got the goat up top. Not a lot of people are going to spend a lot of time looking down at this grass. You know, I think that's an important lesson to learn in making art, is just how briefly people are probably going to look at it. And while I understand, you know, very minute details can impact people on this kind of like deeper psychological level, it's also just kind of like a reminder, like, yeah, you know, do I feel like putting all this time into this grass? Not really. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make it as best as I can. And this is kind of implementing a strategy I used to not even do, where I've left it kind of open, so there's little pockets of kind of exposed color. And I used to be like so meticulous with my line work that I would have this all down to the blade of grass. So then when I'm coloring, I'm kind of like filling in individual blades of grass, and that is as kind of mind-numbing as it sounds. And at some point I was like, why am I doing this? It looks good. Here, there we go. But are people really looking at it? I think it's a little dark. Kind of make this a little more yellow. There we go. And then I think I'm going to take some of this tunic green and just add little... Oh, this isn't even that bright. Okay. Adds just some little hatchies. Maybe even have them hopping out. Looking pretty good. Okay. So, where are we at? We put this away. Okay. So, let's get a background color in here. I'm feeling like a really strong orange for whatever reason. Okay. It's kind of killing that grass. So let's tone it down a little bit. Yeah, maybe that grass is a little desaturated. See, this is the hard part about coloring. And I'll say, normally, I actually kind of skip something I normally do. Wait, what's happening? Oh, okay, I messed up. Okay. I accidentally dumped this coral color on my layer that had the grass. Whoops. Okay. That happens all the time. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to keep the eye white. I like the white eye. It's maybe kind of a quirk to my work. But I'm cool with that. So it's looking pretty good. But I'd like to add in some value. Now, okay. Now this is the part I promise will be faster than expected. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and combine the grass. I'm going to go ahead and... Okay, that's cool for now. So I use clipping layers, or this is kind of a new coloring technique I've been doing, but I figured this would be a good time to show it. So, like a shading technique. So I use a soft brush on airbrush. And there's a couple of different ways to do this, but this is the fastest. Make an empty layer above the layer I want to add value to. Turn on the clipping mask. So this means I can't color anything other than this. So I can really easily add shadows. And this is legitimately like airbrushing it's a little too saturated. There we go. And then also set the eraser to airbrush. Kind of clean this up a little bit. But yeah, I started doing this. I I usually sometimes do it by making shapes and then using Gaussian blur, but I like this. I don't. Oh yeah, I shouldn't do that. With the airbrush, it's kind of hard to use the ink dropper. So normally, when I'm coloring, I'll like tweak it and then I just use the ink dropper to get the new color. But I don't really like adjusting my values until I'm totally done. All right. Now, same for the tunic. Like I said, this is the part that I was like, it's going to be fast. Kind of, got lost in the sauce a little bit. That's okay. I think a massive key to making art, and I had a painting professor tell me this. He is the GOAT. One of the best teachers I ever had. He told me, when I'm really painting, when I'm really getting my best shit done, I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just kind of there. I'm just kind of there I'm along for the ride. And I think that is something we should all be really striving for, especially when you're talking about the mechanical craft of drawing. For example, like, yeah, you want to be present when you're formulating your plan, but at a certain point, just chill out. Okay, I think this is looking pretty good. Let's get rid of this coral for a second. I don't know how much I'm digging the coral. I think what I'm going to do is add a background shadow. So this will be a good example of how I use the Gaussian blur. So what I'm going to do is make like a shadow of this color. And then I'm just going to really quickly make kind of this like silhouette. Wait, what's happening? Oh, that's my problem. So then what I'm going to do is make this kind of like silhouette. Then fill. Then blur it. And then that creates this nice kind of picture. There's more of a kind of like this illusion of space. Add some depth. But I am not sure. Maybe a little more pink. Yeah, I'm digging this kind of like peachy summer vibe. Now, I don't always do this, but I may combine them now and then just kind of bring it down a little bit. I don't know. Did I want to do that? Did I? Undo. Again, you're working digitally. Do it. Because when you're working with ink, you can't do any of this stuff. No. Get out of jail. Okay. I think this guy's looking pretty good. Yeah. I think if I were to add anything, maybe, is I kind of want to add... Oh, we're at our max layers. You know what? I'm going to take that as a sign. We finished the drawing, used all of our layers, and he looks pretty dapper. I'm going to say this one was a success. So, okay, we just hit the 50-minute mark. So, I guess it ended up kind of being more like an hour. But that is okay. So, yeah, I just want to say thanks. And I hope you guys dug it. And I'm going to keep doing more stuff like this. So, yeah. Let me know if there's any tutorials or anything like that you want to see, or any videos you want to see, maybe me working on commissions, me working on kind of sketches for fun, or some projects, whatever. So let me know. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you next time.